This is the 14th and final game of the FIDE World Chess Championship 2023. We have Ding with the white pieces. If either player wins today's game, they become the world champion. If they draw, we'll take it to a rapid tiebreak tomorrow. So we have a Nimzo-Indian right out of the gates. And this is bishop to f4 by Jan, pinning the knight. e3, castle, bishop to d2. This is a solid move. Played by Magnus Carlsen recently at the Chessable Masters against Hikaru. d5, a3. And here knight f3 is much more common. After a3, eval's 0.06, so very close to equal. And white is only scoring 46.2% in the chess-based database. So I think Jan should be happy with the position at this point from the black side. Should be 7, knight f3, c5. And we've seen this in the match. Jan likes to put his pawn up on c5. He enjoys these center pawns having tension and the tactics that ensue. So d takes c, bishop takes queen c2. The position looks very quiet and calm, but these positions can turn wild because a lot of times white will look to castle queenside and play g4, g5 and attack the black king. And now we see d takes c4 by Jan, and here we're in a completely new position in the chess-based database. Bishop takes c4, knight b to d7, rook d1, bishop to e7. This is a slight inaccuracy. This might give Ding a small advantage. The computer liked playing pawn to b6 and bringing the bishop out to b7 next. But minor thing. And Ding kind of returns the favor and he makes a mistake himself with knight to g5. But I like this move by Ding. He's looking to play aggressive. The computer preferred pawn to e4 as a way to push for the initiative. h6 played, and now we see what's called the fishing pole attack. And the idea here is the knight on g5 is bait. So if Jan were to take this knight right away, Ding takes back. This is a much better position for white. You can see the eval bar creeping up because there's queen to h7 checkmate threatened on the board with the knight on f6 attacked. You do not want to play this position from the black side. So Jan does not fall for that. He plays queen to c7, attacking the bishop on c4. Retreat, rook d8, rook to c1, and now there's this cool threat, knight to d5, lining up the queens, but also trying to take the undefended bishop with check. So knight f8 played, and now knight to e4. Ding is starting to offer some trades. Will he still try to keep this pressure up against Jan's king? So takes, queens come off, and this is the first time in the match, I think, that Jan actually goes for a queen trade. He's been avoiding queen trades all match, so he must feel that he has some winning chances here. Bishop to d7. Bishop's trying to head to this long diagonal. Bishop to b4. And I think this shows that Ding might be happy with the draw and simplifications at this point. Things haven't quite gone according to plan. If anyone has an advantage, it's Jan at this point. So he's just going for trades. Take. And now we see long-term Ding has these doubled isolated pawns on the b file. They're not easy to target, but Jan still has a slight advantage, and these are long-term weaknesses. Bishop c6, poking at the knight. Knight to c5. And this is a big decision by Ding. He could have played bishop to f3 instead, defending the knight, but he decides knight to c5, sacrificing the g2 pawn. So Ding does not want to play too quietly here, and he's actually shown this match that he's very good at playing active defense for the most part. We've seen both of these players make some mistakes on the defensive side, but Ding looks for those active defensive moves. So after takes, Ding calculated this long sequence with rook to g1, and he's either going to win the b7 pawn in the end or create a kingside attack. So bishop d5. According to the computer, it was a little more accurate to play to c6 with the bishop, and I think Ding's next move highlights it. He makes an excellent move, pawn to e4, kicking the bishop, because now when the bishop goes back to c6, there's b5 kicking it again. And Ding is going to win this pawn back on b7. So retreat, takes b7. We're back to just a very slight advantage for Jan, around 0.3 according to the engine. Rook to d4 by Jan, attacking the e-pawn, trying to apply some pressure. And now we see another active defensive move by Ding, and Ding is really good at finding the rook lifts. Rook to c4, offering the rook trade. Jan needs to keep those rooks on the board to apply pressure to the queenside pawns on the b file. If Jan were to take, Ding is right back to an equal position. So he retreats. and then rook c7, opening up the threat of bishop takes pawn. Rook to c3. Now Ding is thinking, maybe I'll bring that rook over to g3, play h5, threaten to win the g7 pawn, play e5, maybe play f5, f4, f5. Right, so Ding is all of a sudden looking for a kingside attack. Rook a to c8 by Jan, applying 2 attackers to this knight. And here there's kind of a clever idea. This was not played in the game, but knight to b7. After rook takes c3, pawn takes, rook takes, you can play king to d2. And this gives an equal position down a pawn for Ding, but there's a lot of activity. Compare these 3 pieces with these 3 pieces for white, right? I think white's pieces are much better placed than black's in this position, even though black is up a pawn. So b4 was played in the game to defend the knight. Knight d7, and now we see a doubling of the rooks. So Ding had this in mind, and he went for it anyways. But this is a bit of a mistake. It would have been better to keep the rook defending that knight and play a move like king to d2. But that's not easy to see because you are still dropping the c-pawn in the end. After knight takes c5, let's show this on the board. King d2, knight takes c5, pawn takes, rook takes, rook takes, rook takes, rook to b1, let's say. You're down a pawn and holding this endgame. The extra pawn is the g-pawn. So Ding did not go for that. He doubles rooks. Knight takes c5 played. This was a mistake according to the engine. The way to play for the win is actually g6. And the commentators mentioned this during the game. Fabiano Caruana said g6 was the top move, but the natural move is to play knight takes c5. And the idea here is if h5 is played, now you take c5, pawn takes, rook takes, and if pawn takes pawn, you take back. The bishop guards this pawn, and your extra pawn is actually the passed h-pawn. This is a better scenario to play for a win. You want a passed pawn. And here the top move for Ding, not easy to find. You sacrifice your rook. Take, move the king, rook takes, but now you have this rook versus bishop imbalance, and those give some additional chances to play for the win for Jan. Okay, so knight takes c5 played in the game. Takes, take g7, king f8. King h8 would have fell for mate in 2 with rook to g8, other rook to g7. Bishop to d3. And the idea here is put the king on e2 and the c2 square is guarded so a rook can't drop down. Rook to d8 played, and now Ding makes a bit of a mistake. He plays king e2 anyways, missing this idea of rook to c3. So what he should have played is king to d2. Then there's no way for that rook to get down on the 3rd rank, and the rook can't come here anyways because the pawn attacks it, so king to d2 is the better move, but not easy to spot. King e2, rook c3, double attack. Now let's highlight the problem here. If this rook were to drop back, let's say, to defend the bishop a second time, you can actually play rook takes d3. And after takes, there's bishop takes b5, pinning the rook to the king. And this is going to be a lost endgame after the trades, because this black king is going to come win these pawns easily. The white king has to go all the way over to a7, and it's not going to be able to get back in time to help out with the defense. So that would have been a nice tactical shot. The bishop takes b5 move, but of course Ding is not going to fall for that. He plays rook to g8 check. And now rook 1 to g3. So at this point, Jan has a big advantage. Rook to b3 is the top move, threatening to win this pawn. And the question here is, can Ding hold this position and force the tie breaks? We're on move 36, so they have 4 more moves to go. 20 minutes for Jan and 13 minutes for Ding. So we're seeing a little bit of time pressure for Ding again, and he cannot make a mistake. Cannot afford to make a mistake in this game. e5 played by Jan. He kind of misses his chance. Rook to b3 was the way to put pressure on, like we talked about. Let's say rook here, rook to d4. This threatens rook takes bishop and this pin, because now the rook's not on d8 where the white rook can take it. Say bishop c2. Now you grab the pawn, rook b2, and you can tell that black has the advantage here and is playing for the win with the passed a pawn running up the board. So e5 played instead. This loses that chance to get that really strong advantage. Ding finds the top move, and the position is now close to equal again. You can see that eval bar, 0.1 for black. Rook d6 defending. Pawn to b6. Ding looks to tactically simplify the position. He's good at finding those moves. Rook takes b6, and there's this cool idea. Rook takes e8. Brilliant move. And after king takes, bishop b5 check, wins the rook back. So now we have the extra pawn, but it's only a rook and pawn endgame. Computer says 0.00. They just hit move 41. Plenty of time on the clocks. They could almost shake hands here. At the highest levels, these rook and pawn endgames, where it's a known draw, lead to a draw most of the time. But why agree to a draw here? World Championship is on the line. If you're Jan, you might as well press for the win. So he plays king d7, rook f3. So the question here is, how does Jan make progress? He shuffles a little bit and then starts pushing his a-pawn up the board. And then Ding comfortably gets the rook behind the pawn. So now what Jan wants to do to make progress with the a-pawn is he needs to check and get his rook in front of the pawn. So he does that. But now, how do you make progress as Jan? The idea is you want to get this pawn advanced as far as you can. Then at some point you move the rook away and try to win one or two of white's pawns. And if you're at the beginner level, sometimes what you can do is you can put your rook on a1, put your pawn on a2, and get a check against your opponent's king, queening on the next move. But Ding is not going to fall for that idea. So what's going to need to happen is Jan needs to sacrifice that a-pawn and get his rook over to win one of the other pawns, or he needs to run his king all the way over here, start attacking the rook, and then see if he can march his king all the way down to help usher his pawn. So those are the kind of the two plans for Jan. Either abandon the a-pawn or bring the king over to help it. He starts with h5, and he's trying to shut down counterplay from the white king. Okay, so now Jan's making a little progress with the a-pawn. Gets it all the way up to a3. And this is worth noting. He stops the pawn at a3 because it buys him extra time with the rook. If he pushes the pawn all the way up to a2, then the rook is completely tied down. So it's not as flexible. A lot of times you'll see players push the pawn all the way to a2. Once it gets there, they start to regret it because then their rook on a1 is completely stuck. All right, so now we're seeing this king make its way over slowly towards the rook. They do a lot of shuffling though, so I'm going through these moves kind of quickly. And this is a critical point. King e7 played, and now Ding plays rook takes f6, snagging a pawn. But we get to rook b2 and rook b3, and we see this rook guarding from the side with the idea of the king coming over to attack Ding's rook. So now, at this point, there's only one good move for Ding. Only one move that probably holds the draw. So Jan did the right thing. He found this idea, sacrificed the f-pawn, put Ding in a position where he has to find the only moves, and Ding finds it. It's pawn to f4. Excellent move. Let me show you what happens if you play a waiting move here, like king h2. King b7 can be played hitting the rook. The rook wants to stay on the a file to guard this pawn, but also doesn't want to allow the king to creep down the board. So it kind of wants to guard the 6th rank as well. So let's say here, king attacks. The rook drops back, king comes up. And this king is marching towards the e-pawn, but also watching the a-pawn. So now it starts going to the a-pawn, and f4 comes in too late. Queen. The rook drops back. Can secure this pawn, and if we go even deeper, black can wait till the pawn gets close and then bring the king over, sack the rook, win the h-pawn. So super deep. This is the idea. That's how black wins the game. So Ding was not able to sit back and wait with king h2. He had to find f4 here. He finds it. And then he plays e5. Only move again. So now the idea is this king cannot come down the board because it needs to watch the passed pawn. So Ding creates counterplay with this e-pawn. So now king c6. Ding looks a little bit unsure on the live stream. There's 7 minutes for Ding, 35 for Jan. The king is walking towards the e-pawn, and rook takes f4 would actually be a losing move. I'll show that. Rook takes f4, king d5, king takes pawn, and now the king's going to come over, help the a-pawn out. And white's king is completely helpless, trapped behind the 3rd rank. And this is a win because you can wait till that pawn gets far, then attack it, and get to it from behind. So another deep endgame, but these guys know these endgames cold. So rook a6 check played, not rook takes f4. It's king b5. And Jan's shuffling a little bit, trying to create some play. And eventually he has to switch gears and he runs his king back over to the king side. He's trying to find something. I should note here, so in this position, you could play rook h3. And after king g2, rook takes h4. And this is going to reach what's known as the Philidor position. One extra pawn, but this can hold for white. So if you want to look this up and research it, look up the Philidor endgame position. So Ding has that in mind as well. Rook c3 was played though by Jan. And now he's going back towards the rook. But e6 played by Ding. That draws the king back over to the e-pawn. And now it gets a little easier for Ding because this rook is cutting off the 7th rank. And really all Ding had to do here was just shuffle around with the king. So Jan tries to mix things up slightly. But I think at this point the players were blitzing the moves. They knew that this part of the endgame was headed straight towards the draw. Rook takes f4, king and pawn endgame, draw agreed. So that's our match in terms of the classical games. A draw in game number 14. Kind of a deserving result for both sides. They both had some chances, but really neither side had a large advantage or quite winning advantage. So now, tomorrow, we're going into the tie breaks. They play rapid games, and if those are tied, they play blitz games. And if those are tied, they play more blitz games, and on, more blitz games until a winner is decided. So stay tuned for that. I will probably be back tomorrow recapping the rapid and blitz. Thanks for watching.